Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Yua, and in today's video, I'm going to be trying on the beautiful new Anastasia Beverly Hills and Amrezy eyeshadow palette. So if you guys would like to see my first impressions and my thoughts on this and see what makeup look I create with this, then please keep watching. Also, if you are new here, subscribe to my channel. I do post weekly beauty, fashion, lifestyle videos. Other than that, let's get started. Today's video, I'm going to be trying on for the first time the brand new Anastasia Beverly Hills Amrezy palette. This is a collaboration with a content creator here on YouTube named Amrezy. Therefore, for the name of the palette, Amrezy. And this is a very cute, sparkly, pinky themed palette. It's actually a little bit bigger than their typical 14 pan. This is actually a 16 eyeshadow pan palette. So here it is. So as you can see, there are some neutral, some very warm tone mattes, and then lots of glitters. And I believe there are 2 pressed glitters in here as well, which this is the very first time that Anastasia Beverly Hills is incorporating 2 pressed glitters in their palettes. So as you can see, it is a 16 pan shadow, a little bit bigger than their typical 14 pan, and it is $49. So I'm pretty sure because of the extra 2 eyeshadows that are given in here, that is the reason for the increase in the price. So this is gonna be my very first time trying on camera with you guys today. Give you guys my thoughts. Just for first impressions, just right off the back, looking at the palette, even looking at like the promo videos and pictures. Honestly, at first when I saw this, I was like, it's a pretty neutral palette. If you take away the blue and the pinks in here, it's pretty much a pretty neutral tone palette. Like you can see there's some neutral browns, some warm browns, which is very, I feel like, typical of most of Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes. But then for me personally, I don't honestly mind that, just because for me, when I look at palettes, I like a very full cohesive palette where I can build very complete looks. And I feel like even though very similar to a lot of what I've seen on social media and what people are saying, yes, I do think there's a lot of repeat shades just from first impressions and looking at the palettes. But me personally, when I travel, I don't like to take too many eyeshadow palettes. So for me personally, I don't mind that there's a few repeats if there are, because I like to create very full looks with one palette. So if I can do that with one palette, I would love that. So let's just get started and let's see how these eyeshadows perform. I do already have my concealer, and I pretty much set that down with like a pressed translucent powder all over my eyelids. So that's pretty much my base. I don't really go in with a eye primer, but I'm not really sure what kind of eye look I'm going to create today. Very similar to majority of their 14 pan palettes. It does come with a dual-ended brush, but I don't really like these. I just feel like they're pretty rough and they're just not my favorite. So I'm going to go into OG. Right here, it looks like it's a little bit more neutral or a little bit more cooler brown here. And I'm going to just use that as my transition. Now, something with Anastasia Beverly Hills shadows, if you aren't familiar with their formula, they are very soft. So for me, I like to just tap on them. I don't really like to swirl it or put much pressure. I really just like to tap on it. And as you can see already, I picked a pretty good amount of shadows, and there are kickback shadows in here. So I don't know if you will have a problem with that. For me personally, I'm kind of used to Anastasia, their formula, but if you aren't very familiar with their formula, they are a softer formula. Just take that into account. And then I'm just going to use that as my transition. And this shadow is super pigmented. Very, very beautiful. Great, so that shadow performed just fine. Next, I want to go into New Yorker. I'm pretty sure it's like a New York term. A little bit. I feel like this shadow is a little bit warmer. And I'm just going to kind of mix those 2 shadows just to kind of see if you can see on the eyelid if there is a difference. Alright, so me personally, just from using those 2 shadows, OG and New Yorkers, or New Yorker, I can't even say that correctly. I feel like on the eyelids, they look very, very similar. I think it's almost, like for me personally, in my opinion, I feel like it's almost impossible to really tell a difference. I know that New Yorker is warmer than OG, but on the eyelid I can't really see a difference. So for those who have deeper skin tone, maybe give me your input if you've seen a difference, because I have a pretty, I would say I'm in like the medium, lighter, like light medium shade range, and I don't really see a difference on my eyelids. So next, I want to obviously go into some of these pink shades, as that is kind of the overall theme. So I'm going to go into the only pink matte in the palette. It's more of, I would say like a magenta, that berry shade. I think it's called a Semsa, and it's pretty deep. I would assume that if it was a pink palette, there would be maybe like a lighter pink matte in the palette, just so that you can create a transition. I feel like the majority of the pink shadows in here are either shimmer shades or the pressed glitter. So there's only that one pink shade, Semsa, in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that in here and just see how it looks on the eyes. Definitely want to deepen out my outer corners. So I'm really glad that this palette does have some really nice deep browns in here. This Yugo shade looks very plummy. It doesn't look like a brown. I feel like it was a nice transition in between BK, which is the matte black, and 1988. So it's like a plummy shade. It's like in that purple family. But I'm actually going to go into 1988 first, and if it's not deep enough, then I'll go into the matte black. But I'm really glad it does have a matte black in here, because I like palettes that do have matte black. So I'm going to go into 1988, which is the deep brown. And it's super pigmented, so you can see, and I actually feel like I tapped on the shadow a little bit too much. And I hope that I just don't make that like purpley magenta shade disappear. Great, so sorry for the lighting. I know it changed. It did get a little bit brighter. It's because I'm filming directly in front of a window, and I'm filming during the day, so the sun literally is moving past me and I'm facing the sun. So first of all, I apologize for that. But that shadow performed just fine. 1988, it was beautiful. I really love that transition. It's not too deep. I feel like it's a nice deep brown, but it's not too dark. But for curiosity purposes, I'm going to go into the black matte in the palette called BK right here. And I'm literally just going to just tap once. And I'm going to just kind of create a little diffuse kind of wing, just to create some contrast in here. Next, I want to just do my lower lash line before I finish off my lid. So I'm going to go back into, I think I'm going to go back into OG and 1988 and kind of just smoke out my lower lash line. So I'm going to go ahead and mix OG and 1988 and just smoke it out. And of course, I wanted to go into those beautiful shimmer shades, especially this area right here where those beautiful pink shades are. And I definitely want to go into those. So I'm going to go into Resi right here. This is like the hot pink in the palette. And just with the dry brush, I'm going to go ahead and pick that up and place that on my lid. I'm going to focus this. I feel like I want to create like a halo. So let's see how that one is first. So I am getting color payoff, but it's probably one of those shades that look like I'm going to have to keep building it up if I'm going to continue using a dry brush. So I am able to build up that Amrezy shade right here. I am having to go back and forth to pick up more shadow, because I think it's one of those formulas that definitely perform better with the finger, but I like to use brush, so I'm gonna just keep going to build it up until I like it. But I mean, I don't think it's necessarily not performing that well. I just feel like it's definitely one of those shadows that if you don't want to go back and forth with your brush, then I would definitely recommend you just use your finger. But I just, right now I have long fingers and I just don't really feel like going in with my fingers, but it looks beautiful. I think it's gorgeous. All right, and I feel like we're kind of going backwards, but I really wanted that pop of pink, and then in the middle I want to do kind of that pop. And so I'm going to go into the lighter shimmer shade in the palette called Anastasia right here, and I'm going to put that right in the center of my eyelid. And it looks like it's like that pink with gold reflex in it, so I think it's going to be gorgeous in the middle. And then to finish it off, I definitely want to highlight the inner corners of my eyes. And I'm going to go into the palest pink shade in here called Wasted. And just put it right there. The corner. Now this one, I can tell that there definitely is like a hint of like that pale pink, which I feel like is really needed in the palette. And I did a really good job of putting the shadow in here. I'm going to go into, I think, Dragon, which is that gold shade right here, Dragon. It's also a shimmer shade, and I'm just going to pick up with like a dry, flat brush, and I'm going to just go ahead and place that on my lower lash line right here in the sort of inner corner, just to add some color, because I feel like my bottom lash line was just really lacking. So I'm gonna go ahead and just do that. I just want to play with as many shadows as possible so I can give you guys a really good idea on this palette. And now I think it's good. I'm gonna go ahead and finish off with my eyeliner, lashes, and I'll be back to give you guys my first impressions, final thoughts on the ABH Amrezy palette. Alright, so I'm back, and in case you're curious on what lip shade I'm wearing, I am wearing the Colourpop Lippie Stix in the shade Happy Thoughts. This is in a matte formula. I don't know if the camera is picking up very well. It looks like it's a little bit more red on camera, but in person, I feel like it looks more mauve-y, so it's a little bit cooler in person, but on camera, it's picking up very warm. But anyways, yeah, that's my lipstick in case you're curious. But I am back to give you guys my final thoughts and opinion on the Anastasia Beverly Hills Amrezy palette. Well, first of all, let's just talk about the packaging. It is a little bit bigger than your typical ABH 14 pan shadow palette, but I actually don't mind. They're giving you 2 more eyeshadows, so it's okay. Let's go on to the actual shadow. So for the mattes, I feel like they all worked well. They performed really good and very typical of the Anastasia Beverly Hills formula. I feel like this is the exact formula that I'm used to from Anastasia Beverly Hills. I feel like it's very pigmented, soft, beautiful. I will say that I do feel like the magenta pinky shade matte one Simsa right there actually felt like I was able to, either I overblended and it kind of disappeared, or it just over time it kind of disappeared. And I feel like I had that problem with that shade. So I mean, I feel like that is very similar also to one of the Modern Renaissance shadows as well, and I feel like that's pretty typical of those like reddy pinky, like very vibrant shades. So I feel like it did kind of dust away. That was the only thing that I did notice with the matte shades. But other than that, I feel like all of the matte shades that I tried today performed really well and very typical of your Anastasia Beverly Hills. So worked out very good. Now I'm just going to go over to the shimmer shades or the satin shades I did use, which is Resi, Anastasia, Wasted, and I did use a Dragon. So I think that they are very beautiful and they performed really well. Like I mentioned with Resi, I feel like I did have to keep like going back into the shadow and building it up. It definitely was not one of those shadows that you only go once with your brush and it automatically gives that payoff. Obviously, I feel like these shadows will perform much better, especially that Resi one, if I had gone right away with my finger first. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, because some people might not want that punch of, you know, that punch of that shadow right away like me. Now, just on my final thoughts on overall the palette itself and the color scheme, I do feel like if you do cover up all of the like colorful shades, so that would include basically this quadrant right here where these 4 pink shades, Sensa and even Leo, you pretty much end up with a pretty neutral palette. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because I do like shades, I mean palettes that do have shades that are neutral, so it gives you a very cohesive eye look, so you don't have to really dig into other palettes that have different shadows. My only problem with this shadow, my only problem or con that I could see with this palette is that there's just too many similar shades. So I feel like on the eyes, OG and New Yucca, even though they are different tones, New Yucca is definitely warmer than OG. OG feels like it's a little bit more neutral. On the eyes, I cannot really see a difference. So I would have honestly preferred her to switch out one of these 2 shades and actually add in like a light matte pink. I feel like that's the shade that I feel like is really missing from this palette, even though it's supposed to be like a very pink themed, like Barbie themed palette. I don't feel like there's that very light matte shade of pink that really gives you that transition that you can really create. So I feel like there's no transition shade, if you understand what I'm saying, a light pink transition shade. So I did also want to compare it to some other palettes they do already have in their collection. I feel like in my current collection, I think the most similar that it reminds me of is the Modern Renaissance. And you can see why, because there's a lot of those same neutral tones like raw, sienna, and burnt orange, which is very similar to New Yucca and OG. And then as you can see, there's that deep brown 1988. And then in here you have Cypress Umber, but I feel like Cypress Umber is actually a little bit more cool. And then of course that Semsa shade that is very similar to Love Letter in Modern Renaissance. So as you can see, side by side, they are very, very similar. Of course, I feel like Modern Renaissance, definitely the top one, Modern Renaissance, is definitely much warmer. And then of course the new one, Amrezy, I feel like that one is definitely a lot lighter pinks in my opinion. So I feel like if you do have Modern Renaissance, do you necessarily need Amrezy? Well, that's really up to you. I feel like if you want those beautiful shimmer shades and those pink shades, then definitely yes, there's nothing like that in Modern Renaissance. But if you just want Amrezy, like the palette for the neutral tones, which is pretty much this whole bottom row right here, I feel like if you do already have Modern Renaissance, maybe it may not be worth it for you to get it. A palette that it is very, very similar to Amrezy one that is already currently in ABH, their palette line, is the Soft Glam palette. As you can see from the Soft Glam, which is on the top palette, it has a lot of those good, nice neutral tones, which has those very nice transitions, and then it has some very nice, deep, you know, of those outer corner shades, which is a very much similar thing with Amrezy that has in this palette as well. Also, what you'll notice is that the Soft Glam palette does already have some of those nice pink shades as well, and a very nice dusty pink transition, which I feel like is really missing in the Amrezy palette, that I think that Amrezy palette really does need. It's a very nice light pink to transition, but those two are also very similar. I personally love Soft Glam, and I don't think that Amrezy is going to replace Soft Glam for me, because like I mentioned, I love palettes that have more matte, and I feel like Soft Glam definitely does that for me, versus Amrezy definitely has more of those shimmer shades. But as you can see, they are very, very similar. There are some definitely similar shades, but they're not exact, as the undertones are very different. So that is it for my first impression on the Anastasia Beverly Hills Amrezy palette. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on the palette. Do you think it's too similar to previous palettes already in the ABH line? Or do you think it's different enough? Or maybe you're just a supporter of Amrezy, you know? So I would love to know if you will be picking up this palette. And other than that, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you did enjoy it. And I'll see you next time. Bye guys!